Welcome to the Cognitive Crucible, produced by the Information Professionals Association. Our website is information-professionals.org, where you can find links and information about today's conversation and get access to members-only content. Join John Bicknell and explore all aspects of our generational challenge, cognitive security. The Cognitive Crucible is a forum that presents different perspectives and emerging thought leadership related to the information environment. The opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of or endorsement by the Information Professionals Association.
My guest today on the Cognitive Crucible is Dr. Randy Rosin, who was formerly a faculty member of the National Intelligence University of Bethesda, Maryland. He taught courses in propaganda, foreign information and cyber strategy, cyber threat intelligence, denial and deception, and leadership. He's a 32-year active duty Army veteran who has served in combat arms, psychological operations, information operations as a Middle Eastern Foreign Area Officer and in human intelligence operations, notably serving as the Information Operations Chief in Iraq at U.S. Central Command and as the Senior Defense Official and Defense Attaché in Yemen. His research interests are in the intersection of technology and manipulative communication and on the development of information-based theoretical frameworks and military applications. Currently, he teaches critical thinking courses in the Honors College at Montana State University. Randy Rosin, welcome back to the Cognitive Crucible.
It's good to be back, John. Thank you for having me again.
Yep, and so this is your third appearance on the podcast. So two more appearances, and you get the gold jacket. But you're
very good.
You're not there yet, but first,
Right.
he links in the show notes to Randy on episode number 7, way back up at the top on Russia and applied cybernetics, and episode 187, I guess about a year and a half ago, on reflexive control. And for those who are interested in what we're going to be talking about today, definitely go back and check out those other episodes because there is a through line with what we're going to be talking about today. So today, Randy, wanted to unpack for our audience your assertion, observations that warfare is informational. And by the way, to our audience again, for anybody who finds what Randy's going to be talking about today interesting, inspirational, actionable, he would love to engage with other thoughtful people who want to help advance these kinds of initiatives that we're going to be talking about. So, warfare is informational, and with a subtitle, "The U.S. Joint Force Needs a New Information Paradigm." I think I got ahead of myself just a little bit, Randy, but so the question I like to ask everybody is, what is your assessment of our strategic landscape, or if you prefer, the times in which we live? How would you answer that question today at the end of August of the year 2025?
Well, I'll tell you what's been itching my skeptical funny bone these days, and that is the AI and machine learning and our emphasis on uh, you know creating artificial intelligence systems and working that into the defense enterprise. And I I'm kind of skeptical about the whole artificial intelligence thing. And the reason why is because I don't think it's cracked up to what the sell is, what the marketing is. And I think we're all kind of caught up with that. And I think we don't understand or appreciate the limitations and uh, the faults in the system. And we're I think we're falling victim to the hype that surrounds AI. Like I can remember a couple of years ago, it was all about data analytics. And so now it's all about AI and all this hype. And I think it's overhyped. I think it's a lot of it has to do with the different companies who are in that business are trying to attract capital, and so that are really hyping up um, the uh, the capabilities and what this system offers us without really examining the risk factors. So I say this primarily because why? Okay, the faults and limitations and risks that are involved with it. And you have to go back to understand, you have to really understand how it works right now. And first of all, like the name artificial intelligence is you know, a lot of people say that, yeah, that's unfortunate they actually call it artificial intelligence because
Mm,
um, really what you're doing is creating high capacity statistical models that can crunch large amounts of data and give you certain probabilities in terms of things that could happen. So if you drill down a little farther, and you really understand how they're constructed, you know, hey, it doesn't matter what type of, whether you're talking machine learning or neural networks, they're all reliant on data.
mm,
And data is something that has happened in the past. And so if you don't have if you don't have access to information that relates to the data that you're training your algorithm on, then it won't appear in in the output of that algorithm or AI. I'll just go ahead and use the term
hmm
AI.
hmm
So so what happens is that like if an adversary has a capability that the data set wasn't that you weren't aware of and that the data set wasn't trained on, well, the output won't identify that. And so that's I think that's called a false negative. That's
mm,
an unknown unknown. So I'll give you an example, recent example of of an unknown unknown that
mm,
almost caused so a catastrophic event. And the Houthis of all in our little tete-a-tete with the Houthis
hmm
a year ago, they were introducing capabilities uh, that the AI that the targeting systems of our Navy that of our ships that were conducting that operation, their target detection system, how they classified targets and then queued the systems to, were not picking up the sort of contraptions that the Houthis were using to
hmm
attack our Navy ships. So there was there was a couple of close calls, and there was the Navy had, I think NAVSEA, I think had a Tiger team, and they were making like quick on the spot kind of corrections as fast as they could. So as soon as they identified something new, this Tiger team was getting after it, and they were reprogramming their systems to account for these unknown unknowns that were attacking our ships. So um, yeah, so like so the data
hmm
so so the big fault of it is has to do with the fact that the not only the unknown unknowns, but the future is being created now in the present. And if you're
hmm
only,
hmm
and if are things that have happened in the past, you might not have that which is occurring right now at this moment, in your training data that your systems rely on. And just another example was was the Navy balloon or the Chinese balloon that was floating. Like we didn't pick up on it because our systems, our detection systems weren't
Oh,
tuned to that
right.
type of that type of object. And
Hmm.
so we missed this thing, and the next thing you know, it's floating over the United States.
Mm.
So
Mm.
it's things like that that concern me, and that we're all in on this.
It's like the AI is blind to things which are in, well, literally in plain sight, but it's because the data had not been collected in the past so that it was in fact visible to the AI.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about it is that like our radar systems technically picked up the objects. They pick up the objects, but
Mm.
in the software that prioritizes targets and processes that information, they didn't identify it as a as a threat or something that we needed to be concerned about, because they never, it's not in the system. It wasn't trained. The system wasn't trained on it. So, the system was probably trained on fast movers and bombers and things like that that are a threat to, but things that we didn't know were, in existence. The software isn't wasn't tuned to that, and so the output then is an unknown unknown. Which that would be you know a really bad experience all of a sudden to for that unknown to become known, and you have no way to respond to it.
Mm. So you started out talking about how you think that there's a hype cycle around AI right now. I was just having a conversation with another fellow who's going to be on the podcast here in a couple of weeks, and yeah, he was making the case. You didn't say this exactly, but I wanted to get your reaction to this, but yeah, the big AI companies are, all in an arms race with one another, and their billions of dollars are getting poured into AI for advancing uh the foundational models and what they're capable of doing. But this fellow is saying that he doesn't think they really know what it is that they're racing towards. I mean, yeah, people talk about AGI, artificial general intelligence, as like that is the goal or the destination, but it's like, yeah, but then what? And so there's kind of it's like a it's like innovation for innovation's sake without maybe a destination in mind. Anyway, I'm curious if that resonates at all with your thinking on the what you're talking about as an AI hype cycle.
Yeah, so that's a fair statement. But I would just say that you know the people who are really involved with the technology of this, they understand that they're not close to AGI, general artificial intelligence. Um, you know, they're all about making these neural networks better and machine learning and so on and so forth. That's where we're at. That's the ceiling that the technology imposes on us. And again, you just go back to the notion that they're all dependent upon data, and that they all use inductive reasoning. They haven't got to the point where we have, uh, there's different types of reasoning
Yeah,
technique.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
could you uh, no one in the audience, I'm sure, but for my benefit, remind me what inductive reasoning is.
Yeah, well, inductive reasoning is reasoning from specific examples to general principles. And you acquire knowledge from experience and observing facts. So again, it's backwards looking. Okay, so one of the things that distinguishes human reasoning from AI type reasoning, which uses inductive reasoning right now,
Hmm.
is our own special human capabilities, abductive reasoning. So, what abductive reasoning is reasoning from effects to causes. Okay, so you make some type of you see something happening, and then you generate a number of potential causes as to why
Mm,
that happened. So we refer to that as a hypothesis. Okay. And then we test that hypothesis, which is a guess as to
mhm,
what
mhm,
may be
mhm,
the cause of something. And so you develop a number of different reasons why, and then you collect evidence and facts to validate that hypothesis, right? So, right now the AI can't do that. So, the hyperventilation about AI replacing everything, all like, human, what we know to be work, it's almost like, it's almost like hyperventilating because
mm,
humans still have the, certain mental capacities that AI does not have. And I will say that it's already floating around. These kind of misconceptions are floating around in our doctrine. So, for example,
mm,
in JP 3-04, uh, it talks about my assessment is it anthropomorphizes machines, and we're not even close to that yet. But they talk about like humans assign humans along with automated systems. I'm trying to get this right, from my
mhm,
memory. Like humans and automated systems assign meaning to things, and that, and it's like, well, creating meaning, associating ideas with symbols, that's inherently a human function. Humans do that, and then it gets programmed into machines, and machines store it into memory, and humans recall that and then use that in various sundry applications. We all use Google or maybe Chat GPT, or okay, what is this or what is that? How do I get this recipe for that? And even though you might have a general notion of how to cook something, for example, you look up the recipe on how to cook whatever it is that you're trying to cook. So I don't think, for higher level reasoning and thinking, we're not even close to that yet in development of AI. So these type of things, I'm afraid that we don't recognize that there are limitations and there are risk factors involved with going all the way all in with AI. So that's one of the things that I'm really concerned about.
yeah, 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 for sure. Well, I think it might be helpful for our audience, and to tell me if you think that this would not be a productive way to go, but to um, talk a little bit about how, like Russia in particular, maybe, but China also, but how did these two uh, countries, think about information differently than we do, and I guess, leading towards, how does this make you conclude that our joint force needs to adapt their way of thinking about information? Does that sound like a productive way to head?
Yeah, well, let's go down that pathway.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I think that we have to, follow our own kind of cultural approach to things, just as everybody else does. The Russians and Chinese, they, they look at the technology and they see, okay, how can we adapt it to, how we think about things? And so with the Russians. The Russians have a legacy of cybernetics, where once upon a time that was the official science of the Soviet Union. And they still have a very, their doctrine is based on cybernetic information related concepts. So from that, they have a much clearer, because cybernetics is something is a theory that could be applied in both human and machine contexts. So
Mm.
right away, you've got a framework for thinking about how humans and machines think about how process information actually. So there are parallels on how they think, how they collect data, transform the data, store the data, and produce outputs. And the cybernetic cycle is simply that. You're collecting information, you're processing it, you're outputting it, and then you're getting feedback on the
Hmm.
results of the output on the output, and then you feed it back into the system. So, so
I,
an
I
example
and
of that,
again, I suggest our audience go back and check out your previous discussion on this. One of the things that I remember from that original discussion on this, Randy, was that um, uh, you know, okay, so cybernetics exists. It really started flowering in like the 1950s, right? With Wiener, with Norbert Wiener and um,
yeah,
gosh, I'm
Norbert Wiener, yeah, you got
yeah,
it, yeah,
Wiener, yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and others, right? In
yeah.
that AI and cybernetics, but there, I mean, there was like a major schism back then too, wasn't there, between Wiener and other pioneers back in that day? Anyway, that's
Yeah.
probably yeah, a little bit of a sidebar. But one of my recollections from your previous discussion on this was that Russia really embrace cybernetics as a capability in and of itself, whereas Western countries also adopted cybernetics, but they applied it across the scientific domains and like embedded cybernetics into the other disciplines rather than adopting it more holistically as like a capability in and of itself. Am I recalling that somewhat right?
Yes, cybernetics as a distinct discipline dissipated itself across a lot of different um, other type of fields of study, and it's part of that is the reason the way that science is funded in the United States. It's you have different
Mm,
disciplines that
hmm.
work within themselves and create these stovepipes, and cybernetics is inherently interdisciplinary. So
That's what it
there,
was. Yeah.
yeah, so there was no like Mac Daddy that take control. There was no dominant field of study that took control of cybernetics,
Mm,
and uh, cybernetics in the United States got dissipated, and again, through many different disciplines, I think the electrical engineering field was the carried the torch of cybernetics forward because any controlled system is the function of cybernetics. And so like all the little transistors and all the
mm,
little integrated circuits and microelectronics and even computers operate off of cybernetic principles. So in Russia, computers is considered to be a cybernetic machine
mm.
because of the cycles that a computer goes through in producing outputs. And so, uh, but so that speaks to why you could use cybernetics as a way of thinking. And in the Soviet Union, so they consider computers to be cybernetic machines, and but it was also attractive to them because the notion of using cybernetics to control uh, the for government to exert control over the people appealed to them as well. So you could use
Mm.
cybernetic principles to control your population. And so you're controlling machines and you're controlling humans using the same principles. And that was his, I think that was the subtitle of his book. I think it's control in cybernetics, control of animals and machines, and something of
This
that nature.
this is Norbert Wiener's book.
Yeah, Norbert Wiener. Yep.
Hmm. Okay.
That was his. So the Soviet Union took that and ran with it, and like I said, it displaced dialectical materialism, uh, as the official science of the Soviet Union. And so they still have that legacy in Russia, and they actually have uh, uh, cybernetic schools in the Russian Academy of Sciences. And related to that, reflexive control is what's considered to be second order cybernetics, is uh, their major theory for how to, you could say how to manipulate people, but kind of like their behavioral science theory. And it's embedded in a bunch of different departments at the Russian Academy of Science.
Right. And reflexive control, as you were saying, can also apply to machines, just as with humans.
Yeah, this is one of the risks that AI poses, that it, brings to the front because and the Russians, they do have this capability, and whereby they and I forget the exact name that they use, but yes, they use reflexive control theory in manipulating machines.
Hmm. Wow. Well, okay. So that's Russia. Do you make any distinction, qualitatively important distinction with the way China is looking at information that we should also be aware of?
Yeah, and the interesting thing about China is that it's a kind of a fusion of concepts and philosophy that they've inherited from Sun Tzu, and also Western thinking. So, like, it was interesting that when the U.S. produces like a new doctrine or a new concept, like all of a sudden in the Russian military journals and the Chinese military journals, you'll see them talking about it. So in fact, like a lot of we were talking about information doctrine back in the 90s, and we were, growing that. You could see the parallel in the Russian and Chinese military journals also like borrow concepts that we were talking about, and you find them resident in their doctrine. So it's a fusion of technology, Western ideas, in war fighting relative to technology and their own cultural heritage. So uh, the interesting thing about China and their information doctrine and strategy is that uh, yeah, let me go back a step. So the notion of information superiority is we developed that in the 90s, but the basic idea is that your ability to collect, process, and disseminate information both on your friendly and enemy situation, um, while denying the same to your adversary. Um, is
Mm,
that was our notion of information superiority, and that borrowed a lot from Sun Tzu, who one of his famous aphorisms is that one who knows the enemy and knows himself will not be endangered in 100 engagements. So
mm,
uh, so and John Boyd and his OODA loop and his theory of conflict also borrowed that from Sun
mm,
Tzu. And
mm.
it's interesting that the Chinese have adopted, information superiority is a operating concept in Chinese doctrine. But going back a little bit, uh, when you talk about, and this ties to why I say one of the reasons why I say warfare is informational.
Mhm.
And if you look, if you have this thought and you go back and examine some of the canonical military texts and you go back and you look at Sun Tzu's On War, uh, it's all about information. And so um, the Chinese have a natural proclivity towards these type of concepts, towards manipulating information, because that's something that they draw their military heritage from.
Hmm.
And the other aspect of Sun Tzu that finds itself in Chinese doctrine is the notion of stratagem, and that was that was Sun Tzu's name for how you defeat. That was a defeat mechanism for your adversary, and the his aphorism, "All warfare is based on deception," is related to uh, that notion of stratagem. And what stratagem is simply manipulating your adversary to do something that benefits you, right?
Hmm.
So
So
uh,
I mean, that's seems very much like reflexive control.
exactly, exactly. That's
Yeah.
so they came about they got to the same place but by different pathways.
Is
So
that right? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
yeah, I
Yeah,
think I
okay.
mean
Yeah, yeah, no,
it's
that's great.
interesting
The
thing.
related or again, I was talking with a fellow about this just a couple of days ago, but there's a a prominent I think he's a psychiatrist or psychologist. I might got that have that wrong, but Carl Friston. Do you know who Carl Friston is? Has that name come across? Have you come across that name?
I do not.
Carl Friston. He is developed um, uh, active inference and the free energy principle. And the free energy principle, I'm not going to do it justice, but it's all about how uh, uh, people pursue goals, and as they pursue their goals, like the first and foremost is you're trying to minimize the amount of energy it takes for you to pursue your goals. But just like you were describing with uh, the Russian and Chinese different approaches and arriving at the same conclusion. He does the same thing.
Mm.
He has like a like a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach, and through different routes arrives at the same conclusion about this free energy principle and how people minimize energy in order to pursue their goals. Like I said, I'm not doing it justice, but I
Right.
I I think, but my thought here though is that if two different societies, cultures use two different routes to arrive at the same, um, let's say in this case, engagement strategy or or arrive at a capability, that to me at least somehow strengthens the importance of it or something like that. It's almost like in regression analysis where again, this is like one of those things. Never do math in public. So
Yeah, right.
I'm on dangerous territory here. But I'm trying to remember what the concept is in regression analysis. But it's like uh, I'm going to have to call a timeout on this. Hang on a second. It's I can't believe I can't remember what it is, but it's like gradient descent. Have you ever heard of
Uh,
that? Gradient descent?
yeah, well,
It
I've heard of regression analysis, but not.
Yeah. Okay. Maybe I won't cut this out. I'll just it'll be a humility moment for me. But a gradient descent. It's a statistical technique for like in a stepwise fashion, in kind of like an evolutionary fashion, arriving at whatever the most optimal result is
I
for the
see what you're saying.
regression, right? And so it
Yeah,
uses like differential equations and all this stuff. But anyway, you could start at different locations, and in a stepwise fashion, you arrive at the same optimal result. So in that way, I'm talking the way you were describing Russian culture and the way it arrived at a reflexive control kind of a employment, and Chinese culture doing the same thing, that to me speaks to the validity of the of the final result.
Well, as we like to say, there's possibly a there there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, well, yeah, so continuing down the path of warfare is informational. I mean, to our U.S. Western mind, I mean, what's the so what to that? I mean, like, okay, warfare is informational. All right, I've got to I've got to run out and pick up my kid from daycare now. I mean, how do you make that matter to somebody who's like, you know, wanting to understand the gravity or I mean, how is this going to like bite us in the butt if we don't embrace this notion?
Well, it's going to bite us in the butt because it already has, although indirectly.
Hmm.
And I'll give you an example. If you know, if we understand that warfare is informational, and we create, and that becomes our paradigm, our dominant paradigm, um, and we have a framework that allows us to see how how to look at humans and machines in terms, like in an abstract sense, to look at us in terms of information processing entities. Okay, so we as human beings, we process environmental information that determines how we respond. Not only cognitively, but physiologically, our bodies respond to the information it receives through its senses in order to regulate our own, biological
Hmm.
functions. Like, and so, if it's cold outside and our body temperature starts to drop. The sensors in our skin is our sensor for temperature.
Hmm.
So it'll send a message to our brain and to our centers that control, the physiology, and we'll start to shiver. We'll activate the muscles to start to shiver to raise our body temperature up again. So that's a physiological response, but also, from a cognitive perspective, that's how we make sense of the world around us. That's how we make decisions. That's how, we perceive things, is by processing information. Machines, especially, nowadays where, everything has a little chip in
Hmm.
there, also processes information. Like, it's hard to find, like, you even go down to like vehicles, trucks, Jeeps, whatever.
Hmm.
There's all a CPU in there that controls the functions of the vehicle, that depends upon information of like if there's a sensor in your oil pan that says that, like, oh, okay, that it's starting to heat up. Well, that'll send another signal to the control unit. Control unit sends a signal to your coolant system to kick it up a notch. And so,
Hmm.
and and any type of guided weapon or anything like that, it all uses information, and they all process information, and everything works according to the same principles, right? So
Hmm.
you have sensors, you have information, you have the transformation of information, you have a signal that goes to an actuator that changes the behavior of the system. And so that works with machines as well, that has some sort of like control device, some sort of computer chip or whatever. So it all
Yeah.
works off the same principles. So if you think about it in those terms, then you could start to break down some of these like stovepipes that we have. So for example, uh,
Hmm.
electronic warfare guys and gals, I guess, what do they call themselves? You know,
EW?
hyperbolic. Yeah,
Oh,
well,
what?
no, they call it electromagnetic spectrum. operations.
Oh, ECMOs and her, I don't know. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm sure
well,
there is probably a colloquial term these days. Yeah.
well, they've gone away from electronic warfare to this EMSO kind of
Okay.
concept. Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I mean, the electromagnetic spectrum, covers, uh, you know, the infrared, the ultraviolet, the X-rays and gamma rays, and they don't have anything to do with that. So really, only they're only working in the radio
Hmm.
spectrum of the electromagnetic because I mean, it encompasses a lot of things, electromagnetic energy, right? So, and actually, and the Russians had it right because they call it radio electronic warfare. Yeah, yeah. So,
It's a little
uh,
bit more specific.
yeah,
Okay.
but
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
so
Yeah.
but it's a more accurate description of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But
Okay. Yeah.
one of the problems with information operations and the concept that we, generated out of the 90s was that people didn't really know how the different cats and dogs would fit together. So it was always a struggle with with the planners who were the electronic warfare, the computer network
Mm, mm,
people, those or cyber operations now. And so because they saw
mm,
themselves differently. They saw themselves as like, oh, we're electronic warfare. This is what we do. We just like use power, to disrupt enemy command and control or
mm,
missile guidance systems and
mm.
whatnot.
Well, this whole stovepipe thing that you've mentioned a couple of times, and the Western application of cybernetics, that's been honeycombed throughout disciplines rather than also adopted holistically as its own thing, uh, you know, is uh, the problem here, right? You were just talking about it. You've got all these different communities, and they've all got their hand on the overall problem, but none of them are holistically attempting to tackle the problem.
Yeah, and that's because the problem always was where is the framework
Hmm.
that enables these different capabilities to see how they work together. All
Hmm.
right. So we don't have that. And so consequently, we had, Cyber Command, who was all technically oriented. And over time, they've realized that, wait a minute here. We have to incorporate the human element. Like cyber operations is not just about uh, technical manipulation, like maneuvering zeros and ones and things like that. There's a human in the loop somewhere, and so we need to account for that. And they've been in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, they've been realizing that, and so Cyber Command has been hiring psychologists. I think there's wanted ads for MISO planners, PSYOP planners to on the civilian side to go and work in Cyber Command because they realized like all of a sudden there was an
Hmm.
epiphany like, oh, well, yeah, there's a human
Hmm.
in the loop
Hmm.
and maybe we
Hmm.
need some people who know how to manipulate human beings. Maybe they
Hmm.
should be a part of this organization, this
Yeah.
organizational construct. So the Russians don't have that kind of problem because if you look at the GRU, which is the major culprit. They have the major intrusion sets. I mean, the SVR and the FSB have their little computer or cyber operations, but the GRU are the main actors. They're the ones that interfered with our 2016 election. There are a lot of the ones that are doing all of the um, they're doing most of the mischief in the world.
Hmm.
Anyway,
Hmm.
so they have a organization, the KVIO troops, where they reconsolidated, I think, mid like 2015, 2018 timeframe. And so now they had their propaganda folks or psyopers. They are all in different bureaus and whatever. And so they've organized all of them together into one organization. So, if you want to interfere with elections, like hey, so what's the best way, the cyber operators are like, hey, what's the best way that we could influence these people to, in a phishing attempt, or how can we do X, Y, and Z given the human target that we're interested in? So, the human effects, the psyopers are able to sit down with the right in the same organization. Who knows, maybe they're in the next cubicle or something like that. And so, it's easier for them to access each other to get something done. And by the same, and their doctrine allows for this, cybernetic, you have the information technical and you have the information psychological. And that's all linked together in this information cybernetic theory that drives their doctrine and their organization. So it makes it easier for them to
Yeah,
access it. And yeah, I'm
is
sorry.
there no, this is great. And um it are I mean, presumably there is also, not just two people sitting side by side who can confer with one another and coordinate these kinds of activities better than we can, but there's a whole compute technical stack infrastructure which is integrated in ways that we are, don't have anything close to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, we don't have anything. Well, we're little bit by little bit, we're recognizing it, but like right now, organizationally, because we lack a coherent framework gives which gives the different capabilities and the services that own the capabilities an idea about how it all works is supposed to work together, right? And so the problem is illustrated by Cyber Command, which was created as like a technically focused zero and one, maneuver force. And then you have the PsyOpers who are like deeply buried into SOCOM. Uh, so you have Cyber Command, and then you have and then you have SOCOM, and then you get Army Special Operations Command, then you got SF Command, and then you finally get down to where the PsyOpers live. So in the 2020 election, defend the election operation that we conducted, Cyber Command had to put in a request for PSYOP support for that, and it had to go through the joint staff and make it all the way down to SF Command to request the PSYOP support. And at any level, that could have been disapproved or pushed back, or well, we've got many other missions right now, and so we're committed. We don't have anybody to spare, and that takes
Ah,
that takes
so
a long time to kind of generate forces that work together,
ah, ah,
conceptually and on a task force level. So
yeah. So you've probably said this like two or three different ways now, but I'm just now putting it together. Um, the the machine operations cyber, let's just say, those are machine. Let's call those machine operations, and human operations are very disconnected. And bringing them or connecting them is like probably one of the core um, uh, parts of your vision. Would you say that that's accurate?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I trace back the original sin to how we conceptualize information. So right now, our current informational paradigm is based upon the notion of or one aspect of information, and that's semantics and meaning. Like if you go into 3-04 and you look at it, it's all about it's a human-centric interpretation of information, right? Uh, so right away, we being like materialistic thinking people, our culture, we're very material, technology focused. And so because it's focused on meaning, we don't intuitively associate like information with something larger than just meaning. And so we have this break where we think of things differently. Oh, C5 IRST. Uh, yeah, yeah, that's information that's all about the manipulation and processing of information, that whole C. But you know, but where our information doctrine lives, it doesn't live in C5 IRST at all, right?
Yeah, the growth of that Frankenstein is um, you could consider that to be the pressure that we're feeling that is like pushing us in this direction. It's it's
It's a the
you
centripetal or what
you
centrifugal force pushing
yeah.
things away from each other as opposed to pulling them
No,
in.
no, I'm looking at it as pulling it in because I can remember when I was in the Marines back in the mid 1990s. Yeah, at headquarters Marine Corps, you had intelligence was its own directorate and communications was its own directorate.
Right.
And then eventually that was like, okay, well, let's combine those, and then so on and so forth. And here you are, this isn't the Marine. Well, the Marine Corps now has a deputy commandant for information, which includes what used to be just communications and also intelligence. And so all of this has been aggregated. And so it's interesting. There's another pathway towards what you were describing for both the Russians and the Chinese, two different pathways of arriving at the same, capability. And it seems like we too are on our own unique pathway, and we are advancing potentially towards the same kind of a capability, except we're last to the game.
Well, I have to say though,
Maybe I'm being optimistic, but
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, but I don't think we'll ever get close to that because again, how we think about information. So, again, when you go through the latest DoD doctrine, this Joint Warfare Concept 3.0, um, it doesn't talk about information until you're deep into the deep into the publication. And I'm saying what you have to do is you have to forefront that information because information enables the entire doctrine. And they sort of recognize it because on the big giant crazy slide that they explain, JWC 3.0, you see information there. But I've seen information there going back to the 90s, and it hasn't really manifested itself in something tangible, a real framework for thinking about information. And I just want to say that, the important thing, the original sin is only thinking about information in terms of meaning, okay? Because it's
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
you have to think of information as being pluralistic in
Hmm.
nature. Okay, there are different aspects of information that you need to understand, and that has to be codified in doctrine. So so it's my claim, my assertion that um, until we do that, until we recognize that there are many different aspects of information aside from meaning, we're going to be shooting behind the target all the time. So, so for example, when I say that there's different, when information has a pluralistic nature, in addition to semantics, because it does that too. Information does have we use it as human beings to create meaning. So that's one aspect of it. But another aspect of it is, information from information sciences, which is referred to as entropy, one of your favorite one of your favorite
Love it.
concepts.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so, the entropy in information science is something that was, Claude Shannon was I don't want to say he was the discoverer, but uh, he was the main theoretician who created this notion of information as being a choice of the choice of a message among all possible messages, and that it's a measure of uncertainty and disorder in a communication system. So you have to take that interpretation of information into account because that's what drives our entire digital world, is Shannon's notion of information. So so that's one aspect of information that we need to account for. Um, and the other one comes from the physical sciences, and that is one of the notions that is fairly well established in the physical sciences is that information itself is physical, and
Hmm. Hmm.
this view um, was initially articulated by Ralph Landauer, who's a physicist, and he noted that information is not just an abstract thing. It's not just knowledge. It is something that is physical. And it's tied to the physical world because any type of information is embedded in some type of physical medium. And that information, because it's tied to that medium, it is subject to the unique properties of that medium. So, for example, a stone tablet, a clay tablet from Babylonia, you know, contains these little hieroglyphics, if I could borrow
Yeah.
Egyptian
Right. Yeah.
term for describing it.
The
Uh,
cuneiform and all that
yeah,
stuff. Yeah.
cuneiform.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So the information contained on that clay tablet in the symbols is subject to the physical properties of that. So that information can be destroyed if you break up that clay tablet. Okay? So what I'm talking to you now, another example is if I'm talking to you now, I'm creating sound waves through the air, which is a actual that's a physical phenomenon, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's hitting your ear and the little hairs in there, and you're processing that, and you're making sense of the audio symbols that I'm communicating. So so that's basically what he's saying when he says that information is physical, because it's always embedded in some type of physical medium, and even in our brains, that which contains the memory of something, there's actually a physical structure that's a physical neural structure that's formed that contains the memory of a given experience or some information that you've collected. So even in that respect, in our own brains, as we think of it, oh, we have a mind, and there's just no, but there's actually something physical that contains the memory of something, the information of something that you've experienced. So there's that aspect of information. The other one is from John
You
Wheeler.
you get into this in your paper. Maybe you're getting ready to touch on it right now, but I mean, but to our audience again, I think Randy would be happy to share some of his work with you. But I mean, you even get into the quantum aspects
Yeah.
of information. I mean, none of this is like frivolous. It's not like you're trying to like cover the bases, but I mean, you're really going down to first principles and building up your assertion about how we need to reposition ourselves here. But anyway, maybe you were with Wheeler, you were just getting ready to get into some of the quantum stuff, I think.
Yeah, but I'm not going to go very deeply. Suffice to
Right,
say
right, right, right,
that,
right, right. But
yeah,
yeah, but you know,
yeah,
for people in our audience who are like, if there's anybody listening to this and they're like, you know, heck yes, where have you been all my life? You know, I've been thinking about this stuff too. You know, I mean, please, you know, connect up. So please proceed. So sorry to interrupt.
yeah. No, I appreciate that. I need to take a breath every now and then. But
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so there's the other perspective from the physical sciences that's important is the view from John Wheeler, and John Wheeler was a theoretical physicist who is considered to be the last great physicist of the 20th century, and just he coined the terms black hole and wormhole and things of that nature. So he's a really august uh, intellectual and scientist. But as he grew, kind of like the last phase of his life, he started to think more and more about information, and he coined the term "it from bit."
Mm,
And
mm,
what he means is that uh, everything physical is information theoretic in origin. And at the most fundamental level, it is the interaction of the quantum particles that determine the shape and form of our universe, and as well as reality. And if you wonder, like, well, why does something have certain properties versus other things? Well, it's because at the quantum level, the quantum particles are actually communicating with each other, right? So you have that, and Einstein called it that they could communicate across the quantum particles can communicate across space and time, and that's what Einstein referred to uh, as uh, as the spooky part of quantum
mm,
physics,
hmm.
because he had trouble with quantum. Anyways, uh,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
as, that's as far as I'll go. But the basis of how we know this is true because that forms the basis. How the quantum exchange information is how quantum computers function. Is that when the different particles come into contact with each other, uh, they exchange information in almost the same way that a computer does when you flip zeros to one and you flip a charge from negative to positive when they come in contact, you change the nature of something. Something happens, right? And so and if you build up, you start at the quantum level and you keep building up, 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 and higher. At a certain point, it enters into the physical world that we could observe and we could make observations from. So these interactions create the world around us, as we understand it to be. So,
Right. And there's some like threshold or, an inflection point or something going from where quantum, well, I guess quantum physics always is exists and it is acting on the world, but from a day-to-day practical life, quantum interactions in my daily life are, not something that I pay a whole lot of attention to. So there's a point where you go from this like probabilistic 1-0,
right.
whenever you observe something, you change its nature up to, well, when I'm going about my daily life, I don't care so much about that. But I've always thought it would be so interesting or so awesome to be able to like uh, photosynthesis, the plant's process of turning sunlight into energy and useful, to help the plant grow. Um, there's a quantum aspect to that, as I understand that, and being able to, access that and basically just convert sunlight into useful energy through some kind of a photosynthesis, like an artificial photosynthesis technique would be pretty amazing. I don't know, maybe that's what solar cells do already, but I,
Well,
I I don't think it's quite the same.
quite, one of the latest applications of quantum is using that for navigation to get around the jamming, GPS jamming. So, you know, quantum information is for real.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
so all these things, these are all things that we need to account for. When we talk about information, like I'll give you a piece of um, evidence as to how DoD currently defines information, and they define it as information is data in context to which a receiver assigns meaning. and and so it totally
If you
ignores.
if you diagram that sentence, you get information is data. And that is like a small slice of the overall information pie as you've been describing it.
Right. So
Information is so much more than data. Yeah.
yeah, and meaning, data that leads to some type of creation of meaning, and so yeah, so you really have to take into account all these different aspects of information. If you're going to have an information doctrine, it stands to reason that that you create a paradigm that accounts for these different interpretations of information.
Wow. Yeah. Well, um, uh, very deep topic. It challenges my Western mind, and I've read your work, and I've had several conversations with you, and it still challenges my Western mind. But let me wrap up, if we may, Randy. So you're a retired Army officer. You've as we mentioned in your bio, you've got um, a lot of really relevant experience in this problem set. Um, what advice would you give to a young uh, service member who is going into this problem space? No matter what their MOS is, whether they happen to be in the electromagnetic world, the PSYOP, the IO world, the cyber world, whatever, they're Intel, they're part of this problem space. What what kind of advice would you give to a youngster who's just starting out, you know, trying to overlay this whole Western challenge that we've got? And what would you say to somebody?
Well, I would say that expand your thinking about what you consider to be information. And I think that there are accessible resources to access that could help you down that pathway. And, we always say as part of our military culture that, professional reading is very important. And so I think in that regard, if you are, if you aspire or you're in the position to be what, 3-04 says is a information planner, that you should avail yourselves of a lot of sources about that are out there that give that yeah, they're easy books to read. And so I would encourage young professionals, information professionals, to dig into some of these sources. And, I'll just mention a couple that are really, really kind of important sources, and written by, authoritative people who know what they're talking about. So, for example, one of the sources is Programming the Universe by Seth Lloyd. Seth Lloyd was he is deeply ingrained in the uh, information, physics and end of the spectrum. He was one of the designers of the first one of the first quantum computers. And look, folks, it's an easy read. He reads in a very accessible style, so it's not like trying to read a philosopher in the Frankfurt School, for example. So that's one source. And the other one is The Bit and the Pendulum by Tom Siegfried. He's another, he's a well-established authority on information. And finally, I would say that The Information by James, I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but Gleick, Gleick. So those are some excellent sources to get started with, and you could go from there if you want to. John Archibald Wheeler, John Wheeler's got had a book before he passed away, and he's also he's again easy to read. He's got a great sense of humor. So those are all good sources to draw on to expand your thinking about what information is. And, to understand that DoD produces things, it's a big giant bureaucracy, and, things are created, ideas and doctrine is created intersubjectively. And that depends upon the experience and background of those who create it. And it's bound to that. It's limited. It's constrained by that. And so you really need to expand beyond that and think on a much broader plane.
And adversaries to the Western Enlightenment experiment are thinking along these lines. So it would also be a worthy project to understand your adversary a little bit better as well. Wow. Well, that is fantastic advice. We'll have links to all of those resources that you just mentioned, Randy, as well as to previous episodes, including an episode we did with the authors of JP 3-04, so that you can hear from them what their perspective on that doctrine is. And with that, Dr. Randy Rosin, thank you again for lending your voice and thought leadership to the Cognitive Crucible.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure, John. I'm looking forward to my smoking jacket, by the way.
Okay, very good. Well, maybe with the fourth appearance would be an ascot, and then the smoking jacket.
The
Yes.
smoking jacket. Very good.
All right.
The Cognitive Crucible is the only podcast dedicated to increasing interdisciplinary collaboration between information operations practitioners, scholars, and policymakers. To find out more about the Information Professionals Association, visit us at information-professionals.org. Please support our podcast by giving us a 5-star rating and leaving a review.